trust in American government is waning amongst its citizens, according to a new report published by the Pew Research Center. It found that only 24% of American people have trust in the current direction of their government, and that number is steadily declining as we race towards another election year in November of 2024. The ability to have thought-provoking conversations which move the needle of progress forward seems to be of great concern amongst American culture and conversations today. Thus, I wanted to sit down and have a meaningful conversation about the state of American politics. In order to accomplish such a goal, I enlisted the opinions and expertise of Radell Lewis, who spends his days as the host of a popular podcast all about politics. He's the host of the Purple Political Breakdown, a podcast that Lewis created because he was looking for ways to have sensible conversations about the issues minus the political partisanship and the way that we look at political bias, to have an open and honest conversation without the filter of bias infecting and impacting our decisions when it comes to politics. And Lewis took some time out of his Tuesday schedule to join me this week to cover a wide variety of U.S. political hot topics. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. To welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you all about politics today, my friend. Great to see you, and thank you for a few minutes.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, it should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Now, I know you started your podcast because you wanted to take sort of a non-biased look at our political landscape, my friend. So tell me about why the current state of politics is so important to you, and why you think other people should take it seriously as well.
So diving into the politics, I believe, is obviously important because politics is kind of what runs society at the moment. Well, it's kind of the way that things are orchestrated and the conversations that are happening take place in the political landscape and the political sphere. So at the very least, understanding politics and at the very least being aware of what is going on is important to get involved or know what side or what position you may align on based on the particular issue. So, politics is like one of the arguably the most important thing in terms of, running our current American society. So knowing how everything works, kind of mediating the conversation to help people understand and finding solutions for America's biggest problems is an important thing that I believe that we do here on my podcast. And hopefully we can get past this like toxic political game and political discourse and focus on improving, at the very least, Western American society for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Radell, I'm going to ask you a really general question on how do you think we can can remove bias in politics today?
So, we talked about it plenty on my podcast on some important notions on how to kind of get rid of bias. But realistically, you'll never truly be able to get rid of bias. It's just like a human thing at the end of the day. So, trying to get rid of things that inherently are embedded in our human physiology is impossible. I'm not interested in kind of setting unrealistic standards. But one thing I will say is we can improve the current state of political discourse. And in order to do that, two very important things that I've spelt out time and time again can help with that. And first thing is obviously increasing your perspective. What do I mean by that? People are so set in one ideology or one framework of thinking that they kind of fall into echo chambers, and social media kind of propagated that even more so. Even though it's supposed to say that you get the ability to interact with all these different individuals, what actually happens, which is again human nature, is you find your clique, you dive into your clique, and you basically stay in that clique. So one thing that is very important for people and individuals is growing your perspective. And in order to do that, you need to experience life a little more. You need to talk to people you disagree with. You need to experience things that you've never experienced before. I had the privilege to experience a lot of different personalities, individuals, and political ideologies. So I kind of have a good idea of how you're supposed to do it and the value of doing so, which is kind of why I'm able to think in a very nuanced way. So growing your perspective, more so getting more experience is a good starter. And at the very least, the second part, which is also very important, is opening, having more conversations with individuals. Conversing with the people you dislike can be, or people you disagree with can be very important to really frame out not only your way of thinking, but also evolve your way of thinking and maybe even change your way of thinking based on new knowledge or new facts you potentially may learn. So conversations somewhere you can have anytime, social media obviously included. So going out in there, conversing with different individuals, trying to understand, listening, not hearing. That's another important part. It's not difficult things inherently. It may be difficult for you as a person because you want to stay in your bubble, but we're not going to get any productive solutions the more we stay in these echo chambers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Radell, I also wanted to ask you about the concept of getting back to more basic level politics in terms of debating issues, because I think American politics has become so territorial, whether you're on the left or the right or through the independent lane. I mean, if you don't agree with a certain political ideology today, you're kind of put in a corner if you don't agree with one side or the other. So how do you think we can get back to debating the issues on the merit of politics rather than making politics so territorial?
A good way to start kind of initiating proper political debate and discourse is individuals that are on the social media platforms that are content creators. They incentivize the value of these type of debates. Because what we've seen from the media is that they're no longer interested in trying to kind of initiate proper discourse. What we see from these politicians is that they see the enemy from the other side, or they showcase the enemy from the other side, regardless of what they do behind the scenes. The image, the perception is the reality to the people. So with that said, we kind of have to take these situations within our own hands. And the way you do that is you as an individual kind of broadcast to your peers the value of having these political debates and political discourse. Now it's already kind of starting because there's political content creators out there that is trying to incentivize them more. And there's others that's kind of dissuade from it, trying to stay in the echo chambers that I dislike so much. But the more individuals that are hearing the message that comes from my podcast, hearing the message that I try to preach consistently, I think the more you spread that message of having these conversations, having these political debates, political discourses, and realizing that the reasons why these things need to happen is it's supposed to institute some type of compromise, and eventuality would be a solution. The most important part would be a solution at the end of the day. So the end goal of any debate or discussion you have in regards to politics should be a solution of said topic. The more people realize that what we're doing now is just saying, no, you suck, you're evil, you're Satan, no, you suck, you're evil, you're, a white racist. More people realize that these kind of things are not productive. They don't push the agenda forward, and realize that the discourse and the compromise that the country was actually founded upon is the way we need to kind of return to, the better we will in terms of political discourse. So spreading this message at the individual level, individuals are going to have to kind of make this part of culture again, because media at the same time is falling apart, but they're doing a terrible job at it.
Yeah, and tell me, I'm also curious to ask you, how do you think we can get people reinvested in the concept that elections do matter and they have consequences that will affect every aspect of our everyday lives? So how do you think we can get people reinvested in the importance of politics?
Well, to get reinvested into politics is a kind of two-way front. Now, I will say that inherently, a lot of the young individuals are probably more invested technically into politics that they ever been before. But the investment that they have into politics is very surface level, and it's kind of getting fed to them, which is obviously a problem because they're getting told basically, I wouldn't say propaganda, but very clickbaity positions is the best way I'm going to put that. Right. So in order to kind of make sure that the individuals that are getting invested into politics are getting invested on what is actually going on in their own country, at the very least, the first thing we need to ensure, and this is more going to be a policy thing, is making sure that the education system is actually teaching proper politics. There's a lot of things that I believe that the education system just doesn't teach. And I mean, throughout my years of middle school and high school, I can say that they taught you the first surface level of what politics and government is, but that surface level is nowhere near enough to kind of go over what is going on in present day politics. They teach you about the governmental structure, but they don't teach you how that structure is implemented into how the society is today. If you want to learn more about that, you would have to go to college, but I don't think that's necessary. So kind of implementing that better in education is a start. And obviously another start, kind of return back into this, is the opening and the willingness to have a conversation with different individuals about these political topics. I'm definitely more informed about politics than most people, and even probably more so than all of my friends. And if they were going to bring up a political topic, I can kind of understand where they're coming from in terms of their opinion. So at the very least, I would engage, try to challenge their thoughts, and kind of inform them a little bit on it's much deeper than what you think. Once you kind of tell people how society really is in terms of politics, for example, when it comes down to the welfare system, it's not a simple thing as in take away all of welfare or make it even more bigger in terms of the funding and the programs. It's much more nuanced. A lot of these things are in a very gray area where picking blue or red doesn't solve the equation. It just creates a different scenario, and we have to hope it works or it doesn't work. So the only way we can fix these situations is if people get involved and people actually make an opinion. And it really starts at the local level at the very least, and then feeds into the federal level. But at the very least, getting started into getting it, becoming an advocate in your local elections and voting, and realizing that we don't want more kind of games being played in the political landscape with people like Donald Trump. I think at the very least that should scare or make people aware that they should be getting involved much more than they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to make sure your voice counts, don't you?
Yeah, I very much agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Radell, if I give you $1 million to produce a commercial about the state of American politics today and the urgency to get involved in the political discourse, what do you think you would focus that commercial on and why?
Well, I would at the very least make sure people know that there are platforms out there that is trying to help mediate these nuanced conversations in the political discourse that is going on right now. Now, I'm not one to kind of make it a Armageddon doomsday situation. I don't think that tends to help a lot of circumstances. It makes people either very desperate or not care at all when you go to these extremes. But at the very least, you kind of need to engage them in an entertaining way because people appeal to entertainment. It's just human nature. And at the same time, kind of inform them that the current way that things are going is not generally the best way for our country. As we see that things are getting more divided and as technology keeps on multiplying, we need to realize that what is going to happen increasingly so moving forward is that the sides are going to go farther and farther apart. We need to realize that when it comes down to some of the biggest issues, your politicians are not talking about how the middle class is shrinking and the poor class is increasing and the richer are getting richer. They're not talking about how our education system is failing the individuals, such as the public education that the poor class especially are receiving. They're focusing on these abstract issues that inherently don't matter in terms of these social LGBTQ BS things, if we're being completely honest. We're not focusing on fixing the country. So you got to appeal to things that truly matter and truly affect the people. And the things that I kind of laid out really does. In general, people don't really care much about a lot of the other issues that people like DeSantis and RFK are talking about in terms of COVID or trans stuff. But what we do care about is the public education of our kids. And what we do care about is making sure that things don't get more expensive than they already are. And the poor class is getting better treatment, healthcare, and other things. So just refocusing on what stuff that matters is a good message to say to the people.
Yeah, and Radell, if we look at the American political system today, obviously the injection of former President Trump has really fundamentally changed one side of the political aisle. So how much damage or how much progress do you think Trump has sort of indicated to the American political system at large?
So for me, the biggest damage that I believe Donald Trump has brought, especially to the Republican Party, is he made politics more of a game than it already has been. And he's really kind of fed into the kind of anti-establishment precedent, and he fed that into the Republican Party. So you have a whole party that doesn't believe in the very government they are part of, which is honestly nonsense. And you have followers that are so kind of so devoted to Trump versus the policies that he can kind of tell people to do XYZ and then they'll act in a very ridiculous way. Politicians inherently should be coming up with solutions and figuring out answers to our country's biggest problems. Once the politician becomes more important than the policy, that kind of tells you that things are going wrong at the end of the day. Because when it comes to our current political landscape, it's either choose the left or the right because there's really no other alternatives. So this left and right situation made it a game. It was a game between who insults better and who has a more charismatic personality between Trump and Hillary. And as we saw from honestly both politicians, is that they just weren't great candidates, but they were the primary ones to be chosen because they appeal to people for whatever reason, regardless of what their political policy was at the time. So Trump has completely damaged the faith that people have in the American government and American system. And there's definitely problems. It's not perfect by any means. But if every answer to a negative about Trump and what Trump does is that the government and the people, a part of the government, is out to get him, what that shows you is that people are not willing to fix the country. They're willing to follow a dictator. It's a very manipulative way to kind of indoctrinate people into a belief style. And Donald Trump although inherently I don't know if it's automatically his fault, but as we've seen, once he came to the landscape, he became president. He didn't really do anything in terms of actual policy, but people love him anyway. That kind of tells you how bad or how much damage he did in terms of making politics a game.
And do you think the American political system can recover from what he's injected into sort of the national conversation when it comes to politics?
I mean, I think America could definitely recover. I mean, at the very least, that's a hope. It kind of starts with Donald Trump not getting reelected. If he does, then that kind of puts us in the similar situation, arguably worse, considering how many people are willing to vote for him. This, even if he went to jail, again, feeds into the fact that they care about the politician more so than the policy. So we could definitely recover, but what it takes at the very least is like effective leaders. The people we voted next, the next politicians, they need to kind of learn from the mistakes that came about from Trump and make sure that we are actually doing things in the betterment of the country as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with that, but do you think that one side of our because there's a whole segment of people in America who will stick with Donald Trump no matter what happens with him from a legal perspective. So, do you really think that we can move the needle in terms of changing people's minds despite all of what he's done to inject himself into the political conversation from a negative perspective, whether you look at what he did with the classified documents allegedly, his role in the January 6th incident. So do you think we can move? And I realize it's only about a third of the people who will staunchly support President Trump, but do you worry at all that we've lost our political sort of understanding of common sense at all, based on what the president has done to change so many people's minds?
Well, like I said, I do think it's possible we kind of get past everything that Trump has done, all the issues and problems that he laid out, all the excuses that come from Trump because of his anti-establishment precedent. It's possible to get past him, and it really, at the end of the day, takes effective leadership. Now, the problem right now we're having when it comes to the Republican Party is that DeSantis is not popular. People don't really like him either, and he's not very charismatic. His policies are too focused on social issues, and he's just doing a lot of things that the people on the left just don't like, and people that are moderate also don't like. So, a Republican Party at this time, as of right now, doesn't seem like they're in a good position because your choice is either DeSantis or Trump. So the appealment of the Republican Party right now is obviously goes to Trump because, again, it's a game right now, and DeSantis is just not good at the game. He's just not. And the issues that I said prior in terms of what we should be focusing on are stuff that DeSantis isn't focusing on. So we would need another leader on the Republican Party to be an actual effective challenger of Trump. And obviously he would need a track record because Trump's notoriety and track record is extremely huge. So someone, just because they're a good talker and have some good policies, won't be enough. Now, the Democrat side probably would still hold strong. I personally think that more than likely Joe Biden will get reelected, which is honestly better than kind of electing Trump at this point. I think Trump at this point is a lost cause. But even the other popular candidate for the Democratic Party, RFK, also kind of sows sounds of like I guess, deceit of the government in the sense that he also has certain anti-establishment precedents that he kind of emits when he's talking about the government, the FBI. So that again, the more rhetoric that we have in regards to anti-establishment doesn't really help the situation. So 3 out of the 4 best candidates we have currently, I don't think are great leaders. So Joe Biden getting reelected, I guess, is probably the best course scenario. And then we have another year making sure that Trump doesn't get elected in. I think if he doesn't win this year, there's no way he'll ever win again. So with that said, after Biden, we're going to be up in the air, but we can move from it, especially since we're kind of recovering from the pandemic COVID situation. And then hopefully we start focusing on more important issues. And once election is done, I think Trump should kind of just go somewhere else.
Yeah, let's talk about race in America. You've brought up Governor DeSantis a couple of times during our conversation this afternoon, and obviously the latest thing coming out of Florida is when we look at what his curriculum says about AP Black history, and so I'm curious when you look at Black people's place in America specifically, and how it's sort of shifting in terms of Republican politics, and then the politics and the societal implications in general. Are you worried living in America as a Black man in particular about the future of the race in America?
So to start off, when it comes down to the thing regarding DeSantis, I actually did a somewhat of a podcast episode about it. And after I looked into it, I think for the most part, it's kind of blown out of proportion in terms of the being upset regarding the idea that slavery benefited Black people. One thing that we said in terms of history is that history is not black and white. There are pros and cons to even the worst case scenarios, the worst things that happen. Whether you believe it or not, I don't really care. It's just facts, right? There are factual things that happened in slavery that benefited Black people to an extent, right? The only problem with DeSantis and and the program is that there's no guarantee that they're going to frame it based off a factual nature, but more so a kind of diluted nature, which is the concern from a lot of Black people in terms of DeSantis and the Florida Republican programs. Because when you frame history, there's a way you can frame it where it's kind of saying that slavery is not so bad. And the moment you start doing that, that kind of undermines how horrible slavery really is. So we have to, in terms of the framing of how they do it in their curriculum, the way they frame it will be a huge indicator of DeSantis's true motives at the end of the day. But if they're just relaying the facts, i.e., there's factual statements that there are certain slaves that were treated from their masters who are one of the probably better treated masters in terms of treating their slaves, that taught them, things like reading and writing. That is an example of bettering Black people technically, right? So if they stick with the facts, then fine, because at the end of the day, it's never a truly evil or truly good thing. The human race is not black and white. It's full of gray, whether you agree or not. So with that said, in terms of the racism and systematic racism in America, for me personally, I'm going to speak on what I believe, and then what I'm going to speak on my personal experience. My personal experience is I never really dealt with racism. I just haven't. And I've been to multiple states. To be fair, I've never really explored the South much, but states I've been in is obviously I was born in Hawaii. I've been to Oklahoma. I've been to Connecticut. I've been to New York. I've been to Virginia, and I'm currently in Ohio. I also been to Iowa. There's never been a single situation or circumstance where I dealt with racism. Oh, I forgot the Carolinas too. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm also saying that America is not an oppressive racist society where there's racism in every corner. There are still recovering instances of systematic racism that exists, that we continuously have to rectify. And that's going to take a collective effort of everybody involved, not just the policymakers, as we continue to try to get rid of these prejudices that may or may not exist in certain areas of society. But with that said, in terms of my own experience, I don't believe you can really say that America inherently is a racist country. I think that's ridiculous personally. But what I can say is that the biggest problem regarding race is that we need to keep on figuring out solutions and strategies for the poor minority communities to exit out of their circumstance. And we need to switch the stereotype and the perception of Black people that if they're in a poor community, that the perception is that they're probably a criminal. Where does that perception come from? It comes from potentially racism, but also it comes from statistics as well. Because statistically, most criminals that are in these impoverished areas are going to be Black people. So we got to change the stereotype. We got to fix the situation that to get more Black people in these poor communities out of poverty, which includes fixing the family structure, which includes getting more people in proper education. And that is the way we're going to start fixing these solutions. Complaining about racism and victim blaming, I'm not interested in because I don't think it solves anything.
Okay, let's turn now to the Supreme Court. You know, Radell, I look at that and I no longer think it's a non-political branch of government. So tell me, why do you think the Supreme Court has become so sort of political? And are you worried about the current state of the court and some of the decisions they've been making?
From what I'm aware of, I think the Supreme Court really hasn't done too bad of a job. My only issue with the Supreme Court as of right now is that I think there should be an adamant effort to make sure the Supreme Court is completely representative of the main ideologies of America. Because obviously, when it comes to the Supreme Court, it's, chosen. It's nominated by the presidents and it's solidified by Congress. And I think there should be an actual effort to make sure it's evenly distributed in terms of the individuals there. Now, one thing that they did implement in the Supreme Court to ensure that there's no favors, there's no give or take for the Supreme Court is saying that they have no term limit. There's no worry about election. There's no worry about, I need to win their favor so I can get back in my position. No, I'm here, so this is my job for the rest of my life until I give it up, basically. Now, the problem we are facing with currently is that there's potentially connections that certain justices, i.e. Clarence Thomas, may have with millionaires that can be compromising the whole legitimacy of the Supreme Court at large. So we got to make sure that if this happens, there shouldn't be you got to strike. No, if we see potential collusion, you're out immediately. So needs to be more pressure on the justices doing their job, because this is supposed to be your job forever. So the Supreme Court can definitely do better in terms of representing the ideals of the people. As for the positions that I've seen that they passed or did not pass, I, for the most part, looked into a lot of them, and I'm pretty much okay with a lot of them. The more dangerous right-wing things that was put in front of the Supreme Court, they denied, which is good, because there was one thing about the Carolinas, the big Republican idea was like changing the way they can gerrymander and giving way more power to state officials, and that would have been extremely damaging to the American government system. And the Supreme Court completely threw that out of the Supreme Court and said that's a horrible idea. So they're doing their job regardless of right or left. I guess the biggest two positions that people on the left would be concerned about would be the stuff regarding Roe v. Wade and would be the stuff regarding affirmative action. Now, the Roe v. Wade situation is so touchy because it really goes based on your own ideological function on how you treat abortion. And I'm not going to go into that right now at the moment. But what I'm going to say is that what they did is they made Roe v. Wade a decision made by the states. And I personally believe that when it comes to policies that are more adherent to individual perceptions, such as abortion, I believe it's better left for the states to choose whether or not this represents their people. And that's what I personally believe. I don't think the federal government should create these type of policies because they truly do not have a best idea of what is the betterment of all of people across the United States. So more like programs and policies that are done at the state level, I personally think is a good thing. I'm not going to speak on abortion right now, but that is a good thing. As for the affirmative action stuff, I mean, affirmative action has proven to not work. It's actually been proven to be more damaging for minorities because they go into programs that they're just not fitted for, and then they fail and drop out. So affirmative action in terms of the education system just didn't work. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. But we need to make sure, and I've talked about it on my podcast, that we implement programs that still incentivize people who are poor but are like wanting to get out of their impoverished community, incentivize those programs more. We can do that without affirmative action. We could think of other programs. So we're just not putting people in and making it a statistical thing where this amount of statistical minorities are in, so we did a good job. No, there's a more poignant way to do it. So yeah, affirmative action just didn't really work. So overall, I haven't really had an issue with the Supreme Court, but I do think they can there's things that can be implemented to make it way better than it is right now.
Do you think they need ethics rules to govern themselves by? Because I mean, they're the only branch of the government that doesn't currently have ethics rules. So do you think that could be a possible solution?
There's some thoughts about ethical rules behind the Supreme Court. To be fair, I wouldn't really know throughout the whole history of Supreme Court if there's ever been an issue in terms of ethics. But as we know, these millionaires, these billionaires get their hand in government. And as we know, it can be very problematic on both sides. Left and right are guilty of it. So making sure that people like Justice Clarence Thomas is not having vacations and having gifts bought from him from a millionaire, making sure that that isn't something that we should approve of is a good thing. And potentially getting him out of here probably would just kind of set a good precedent saying, hey, man, your job is for the people. Your job is not to be in the pocket of millionaires.
Yeah, and Radell, I wanted to ask you about the current role of guns in America today, because obviously, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, you have a strong opinion about gun culture in America and how we can address protecting the Second Amendment while also keeping Americans safe. So what's your current feeling on the current gun culture in America?
I understand the appreciation of the Second Amendment. We need to realize it was initiated for the purpose of protecting oneself, one's country, one's individual community away from the government, the overarching power. So America kind of implemented that in behest of the tyrannical England, United Kingdom from back in the day. So there's a reason why it was implemented. Personally, I don't understand the fascination of guns. I think guns are cool. I've fired a gun before, of course, but the obsession with guns, I think, is a little overboard. I think there's more important things to care about when it comes to society. With that said, the gun culture we have in America is problematic, but like at the same time, the best we can do is finding ways to kind of cover the two biggest issues regarding the gun situation, and that's mental illness, because obviously there's a lot of the biggest concerns regarding gun culture is mass shootings, and that's mostly related to mental illness. Individuals that are very dangerous and very nutty in the head. And the other part about it that we have to kind of look into is gang culture, right? So these two things are kind of the biggest reasons why gun violence is so bad, I guess, in America. And just getting rid of guns won't change these two things. These two things will still exist. And we can't change gun culture. They already have a precedent of how to get guns, where to get guns, who to ask for to get guns. So what we have to think about, the wrong thought process is get rid of the Second Amendment, get rid of all guns. That's a stupid thing to think about. It's unrealistic. The better way to think about it is creating policies to ensure the safety of all individuals that use guns. And we have to look into that more, and kind of the idea that, okay, the state should have no policies about my guns is, I think, is pretty stupid. So more productive solutions, so it doesn't look like the America is trying to take away your guns. We're making sure that people are getting trained better. There's better security across the country. I would say it should probably be implemented in the education system in some way, kind of similar to like a driver's license program. So there are ways to kind of implement it better into society, so people are educated, trained, and so there's just more safety across the country.
Yeah, and Radell, I wanted to end our conversation with a two-part question. First of all, I want to know your thoughts on the way you think the 2024 presidential race is going to end up, and whether you think the Democrats can retake the House and maintain the Senate, but secondarily, I'm curious to ask you to end our conversation about your greatest hope for a productive political future in America. How do you think you would answer that question?
So when it comes to the next election, as I said, it's hopefully we have better and stronger solidified candidates. More than likely, my opinion about the next election is that Joe Biden will be reelected. So that's probably what's going to happen. I would say from what Joe Biden has done so far in terms of the policies that I've seen, I haven't been like overly upset. I think there's some interesting ones, some good ones. So I think Joe Biden, for the most part, and like more often than not, I would say he's done a pretty good job as a president. But at the same time, having such an old individual as their leader is still questionable to me. And I don't want to wish on his downfall, but you never really know when it may happen in terms of his health, right? So that's kind of concerning. But the three other popular candidates, I'm not really interested in terms of RFK, Trump, and DeSantis. With that said, I believe that we can definitely have a more productive political culture. And again, it really kind of starts out with individuals that are not only listening, but also creating their own platforms that also want to initiate a more productive political discourse in general. That is why I created my platform. This is why I created my podcast, because I believe there's a way to have these conversations, have these debates, have these discourse in a way that is more productive than we have currently in society. I do think that my mindset is a spearhead for said conversation and for said productivity. People can look at how I think about things and how I kind of handle things and kind of learn from it in terms of listening, hearing, trying to figure out compromise, try to figure out a solution, and not being totally focused on the political games that the left and the right tend to do on all the time, whether it's one side calling the other side racist, whether it's one side calling the other side Satan worshipers. At the end of the day, there's fun in like insulting and debating and all that stuff, maybe. But if the forefront of the most important thing in terms of our country, which is the government and how it's run and how it treats its people, if that is a game, if that is a joke, if that is just a kindergarten spat, as they say, then that is not going to solve our country's biggest issues. And I think we can definitely get there better than we have. And at the very least, and making a third party, the middle that everybody loves so much, and more popular voice can be a start in mediating these conversations. So it's not just it's he say, she say, it's okay, they said something, here's my position based off both opinions. Okay, how are we going to come to a compromise from all these different perspectives? That should be the most important point for a lot of these scenarios, and that is how we're going to solve things at the end of the day.
And tell me quickly, if people want to get connected with your podcast or you personally, what's the best way they can do that, buddy?
No worries. So I run a podcast called The Purple Political Breakdown. Very easy to find. You can see it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora. Basically anything that you listen to a podcast on, more than likely you'll be able to find my podcast there. Every message that I elicited are my own opinions, obviously, that you can hear on my platform. And another big thing that my platform kind of emanates is hearing solutions from different individuals. I have people from the left, people from the right, people who are nonpartisan, people from other countries, providing solutions to the biggest issues we have currently in the country. And I have two co-hosts that one lean left and one lean right. They're both on and also providing their opinion, but also being able to engage in conversation and push a solution forward. So this is everything that I'm about. This is what the brand is about. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you can always reach out to me. My email is thetrendgoldandfaith@gmail.com. So that is where you can find me.
Well, Radell, I want to thank you for having a thought-provoking and interesting conversation about the state of American politics and our political culture, my friend. I want to thank you for your time and efforts on my behalf. They're most appreciated, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Again, thanks for having me. I'm always willing to have these conversations as we continue to try to push society forward a little bit at a time.
It's all about moving the needle forward, isn't it?
I agree.